Eli Turner preferred the company of cattle to people. At 28, he lived alone on his late father's weather-beaten ranch near the Arizona Territory borderlands, where the wind spoke louder than most folks and the horizon seemed endless. His days followed a quiet rhythm, mending fences, checking water lines, breaking young colts, and eating supper at a small wooden table scarred by years of use. He spoke little, even in town. The people of Cottonwood considered him polite but distant, a man who tipped his hat, paid for his supplies, and left before conversation could find him. He told himself he liked it that way. That evening, the sun was sinking behind the red mesas, painting the sky in streaks of amber and rose, when he noticed a thin ribbon of dust rising from the southern trail. At first, he assumed it was a stray steer, but the shape grew sharper, a horse running hard, its stride strong and purposeful. The rider sat tall and steady in the saddle. As they drew closer, Eli felt something shift in his chest. The horse was lathered but proud, nostrils flaring. The woman astride it wore buckskin adorned, with fine beadwork that caught the fading light. Her long dark hair streamed behind her like a banner. She carried no visible fear, only certainty. She slowed at his fence and met his eyes without hesitation. "I need water," she said. Her voice was calm but firm, and it startled him more than a shout would have. Yes, ma'am," he managed, nearly tripping over the gate latch as he hurried to open it. "Plenty of water." She dismounted with smooth confidence and led her horse forward, thanking him with a slight nod. Up close, he noticed the careful stitching on her sleeves and the quiet strength in her expression. "My name is Nita," she said after her horse had drunk deeply. "I'm heading north. There are men following me." The words tightened the air between them. "What kind of men?" he asked softly. "The kind who do not listen when a woman says no." Eli's stomach turned. He had never faced trouble beyond a stubborn bull or a broken fence. He was not a fighter, not brave, not the sort of man stories were written about. But as he looked at her, dusty, steady, unbowed, something unfamiliar stirred inside him. "You can stay in the bunkhouse," he said, surprising himself, "at least for the night." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. "I know," she said quietly, as if she had already decided he would offer. And as darkness settled over the ranch and coyotes began their distant calls, Eli lay awake in his cabin, aware that the quiet life he'd guarded so carefully had just shifted in a way he could not yet understand. The men arrived just after sunrise, when the desert light was still pale and cool. Eli was in the barn, pitching fresh hay into the stalls, when he heard the distant thunder of hooves. The sound did not belong to wandering cattle. It was deliberate, measured, coming straight up the southern trail. His hands stilled on the wooden handle. Through the open barn doors, he saw them crest the ridge, 3 riders, silhouettes dark against the brightening sky. They rode with the careless confidence of men who believed the land owed them something. Nita stepped out from the bunkhouse as if she had been expecting them. Her expression did not change, but her posture sharpened. She moved to stand beside him, not behind. "You do not have to do this," she said quietly, her eyes fixed on the approaching figures. Eli swallowed. His heart hammered so hard he thought it might shake his ribs apart. Every instinct urged him to step aside, to claim ignorance, to avoid the trouble riding toward him. That had always been his way. Keep your head down, let storms pass. But this storm had stopped at his gate. "Yes," he heard himself say, "I do." The riders pulled up in a spray of dust. Their leader, a broad-shouldered man with a trimmed beard and cold eyes, looked Eli up and down as if measuring him. "We're looking for an Apache woman," the man called out. "She stole something that belongs to us." Nita did not flinch. Eli forced his feet to stay planted. "There's no one here but me," he replied, his voice thinner than he intended. The leader dismounted slowly, boots hitting the dirt with deliberate weight. He walked a slow circle, eyes scanning the ranch, noting the second horse tied near the bunkhouse. "You sure about that?" he asked, a smile tugging at his mouth. Eli's throat went dry. He thought of his father's words about backbone and land, thought of the quiet years spent shrinking from confrontation. If he stepped aside now, he would return to that smaller version of himself forever. "I'm sure," he said again, stronger this time. One of the men noticed the fresh tracks and cursed. The leader's expression hardened. Without warning, he shoved Eli hard to the ground. Before fear could swallow him, a sharp metallic click cut through the air. Nita stood with her rifle raised, steady as stone. "Leave," she commanded. The men hesitated. This was not the frightened rancher and defenseless woman they expected. After a long, tight silence, the leader spat into the dust and mounted his horse. They rode away, but the threat lingered like heat rising from the earth. Eli pushed himself up, brushing dirt from his shirt, his hands trembling. "You stood," Nita said quietly. "I was scared to death," he admitted. She gave him a small, knowing nod. "That is not the same as weakness." As the dust settled on the empty trail, Eli realized something had shifted. He was still afraid, but he had not stepped aside. And for the first time in his life, that felt like the beginning of something larger than fear. The men did not return right away, but their absence did not bring peace. It only stretched the tension thin across the ranch, like wire pulled too tight. Eli found himself scanning the horizon more often, listening harder to every distant sound. Nita remained, not as a guest exactly, but not yet as someone who belonged either. She moved with quiet purpose, helping where she saw need, never asking permission yet never overstepping. One evening, as they sat near the small cook fire behind the bunkhouse, she told him the truth about the object the men were hunting. "It is a sacred bundle," she said, her voice low but steady. "It was taken from my people by a trader who believed our traditions were something to sell. I took it back." Eli studied the flames. "So they call it theft." "They call many things theft when they are losing control." He nodded slowly. He did not pretend to understand everything about her world, but he understood what it meant to protect what little you had left. In the days that followed, they began to work side by side. Nita showed him how to track properly, not just by hoofprints, but by broken twigs and disturbed stones. She taught him to pause before entering open land, to notice birds falling silent, to feel when something in the air was wrong. "You rush because you are uncomfortable with stillness," she observed one morning. He huffed a shy laugh. "I've had plenty of stillness. Not this kind." She was right. This stillness required awareness, not hiding. In return, Eli taught her the steady routines of ranch life. She learned how to mend fence with quick, capable hands and how to guide cattle without scattering them. He showed her how to judge a coming storm by the weight of the clouds and how to knead bread until it felt like soft leather beneath her palms. They began to talk more easily, about her childhood in the mountains, about his father's quiet strength, about loneliness, not as complaint but as fact. In town, whispers followed them. Some stares were curious, others were sharp with judgment. When a shopkeeper refused to sell to Nita, Eli felt the old urge to avoid conflict rise in his chest, but he did not yield to it. "If she isn't welcome," he said evenly, placing his coins back in his pocket, "then neither am I." He walked out beside her, pulse racing but head high. Later, as they rode back beneath a sky washed gold by sunset, Nita glanced at him. "You are changing," she said. "Feels more like I'm waking up," he replied. For the first time, the ranch no longer felt like a place he was hiding in. It felt like something worth defending, and perhaps something worth sharing. Autumn arrived with sharp winds and long shadows, and with it came the certainty that the men would return. Eli felt it in the restless cattle, in the uneasy silence of the birds at dusk. He no longer mistook tension for imagination. Nita sensed it too. They spoke little about the coming trouble, but they prepared. They reinforced the barn doors and stacked extra water near the house. Eli adjusted fence lines to funnel riders into narrow approaches. Nita showed him where to take cover, how to move between shadows without drawing the eye. At night they practiced in low whispers, signals, timing, trust. When the attack finally came, it came without warning. Hoofbeats shattered the quiet just past midnight. Eli was already awake. He rolled from his bed and reached for his rifle with steady hands. Through the window, he saw dark figures pushing through the southern fence, more than before. 8 this time. Nita appeared beside him, her expression calm but fierce. "Remember what you learned," she said. Fear rose in him, but it did not paralyze him. It sharpened him. The first rider crossed into the narrow lane Eli had created between two reinforced fence lines. A warning shot cracked through the night sky. The horses reared, startled. Confusion rippled through the group. "Leave now," Nita called from behind a stack of timber. "You were warned." Gunfire answered her. The world exploded into noise. Splintering wood, shouting men, the thunder of hooves trapped in tight space. Eli moved as they had practiced, circling wide behind the barn to cut off their exit. He fired only when necessary, aiming low, forcing retreat rather than bloodshed. One rider charged toward the bunkhouse. Eli stepped from cover and stood his ground. His heart pounded, but his voice carried. "This land is defended," he shouted. The rider hesitated just long, enough for Nita to fire a shot that shattered the dirt at the horse's feet. The animal veered sharply, throwing its rider off balance. Within moments, the advantage shifted. The men had expected a frightened rancher and a lone woman. They had not expected strategy. They had not expected resolve. One by one, they pulled back. Their leader cursed into the wind before turning his horse and riding hard into the darkness. The others followed. Silence settled slowly over the ranch, broken only by Eli's steady breathing. He lowered his rifle and looked at Nita. The moonlight caught the edge of her cheek, silver and strong. "I think," he said quietly, "I'm done hiding from the world." She stepped closer, brushing dust from his sleeve. "You were never meant to hide." In the days that followed, word spread that the Turner Ranch was not easy prey. Riders from Nita's community began visiting, cautiously at first, then openly. Trade replaced suspicion. Conversation replaced silence. And as winter approached, Eli realized his world had not been invaded that evening months ago. It had been awakened.